You can also undo what you've done. And in this version of Excel, you can undo up to 16 of your last actions. If you simply wanted to undo your last action, you can point to this arrow right here. And if I click undo here, watch what happens. The yellow that we had just put in has been undone. And if I click on undo again, watch what happens. The background for the cells in row 2 has been undone. Now, we could keep clicking undo up to 16 times to undo our 16 last steps. Do you really remember all 16? Probably not. The arrow to the right of this, if you click on it, will show you the last 16 things you did. Now, sometimes in not maybe the kind of detail that you would expect, but at least you have a sense here. Now, you want to be a little careful with this, because if I were to click right now, I would be undoing these last 9 steps, the last 10 steps, and so on. You see the little indicator below that that tells you what you're about to undo. This can be extremely useful. However, if you do undo, as I'm about to do, the last 14 actions I've done, if I click on the last action here, typing 1111 in B5, I've just undone my last 14 steps. Maybe I didn't mean to do that. Every time you undo an action, the information is placed into a different stack called redo. And that's this arrow here. And if we click the down arrow here, we'll see all those things that we saw in reverse order are listed here. So we could go all the way back up to here and redo 15, 14, 13, whatever. We'll do our last 15 actions. That can be a little confusing, and you want to proceed with that cautiously, but the ability to undo your last up to 16 actions can be a real lifesaver. In some cases, you make a false step, you don't sense it, you go ahead, you do other things, and then you realize what a disaster you've created. You do want to be able to undo. So let's remind ourselves as we make mistakes, or sometimes we just take actions that we wish we had, maybe they're not serious. We do want to be able to undo them. Another feature that you might want to consider using is the borders concept. Now, if your worksheet has grid lines being displayed, sometimes the features you're going to be using with border won't show up too clearly. So we'll show you how to turn off the grid lines and then use some of the border capabilities. You may want to enhance your worksheet by putting borders around some cells. Now, with colors here also, you may be competing for attention, but what I'd like to do first of all is talk about the grid lines themselves. I think for most people, you do want to see the grid lines in place as you use your worksheet, and when it comes time to printing, you probably want to leave them there, although you'll always have that choice. Let's talk about how to remove them from the screen. The Tools command has many choices. Choice toward the bottom here called Options gives us 8 additional choices, and it's the View tab that we're concerned about. Okay, right here, we'll click on it. And do notice that grid lines are currently checked. And we can turn this off at any time. This has absolutely no impact on content, it's strictly appearance. We'll click on the grid lines panel there so that the check disappears, and then click OK. Now, the reason we would do this in this case is that we do want to put some borders on cells. We'll talk about a few examples. Suppose we want to border around this block of numbers. Now, whether it's one cell or a group of cells, it all depends upon what you highlight. You can put a border on it of some type. The border toolbar is located right here. We want to click on the down arrow to its right, and we'll see a palette of choices. You can, by the way, drag this palette onto the body of the worksheet and leave it there indefinitely. If we wanted a thick border around these cells, we could click on this particular choice right here. And although we said thick border, it doesn't appear that way. You often have to click away from this to see what was done. So we'll click away, and you can see that the border is a thick border. Let's highlight this again, make another choice. How about a border, looks like a window pane. This means put a border on all cells in the selection. Click on that, and once again, click away from the selection to see the effect of that. If you simply want to border on a portion of this, what you could do is take off borders So let's highlight this. In the border palette, the upper left-hand corner appears to have nothing on it, and that's exactly what it means. Click on this, click away, there's no particular border. If you want an individual cell to have just a border at the bottom, now look closely at this, there's a double line border on the bottom and a single line on top. Click here, move away from this, and you'll see the effect there. You can imagine how this might be useful for total lines. So for example, if I go back here, turn off borders, since this line possibly is a line where you want a thick line under it or a double line under it, you would choose this particular choice. Click, and we'll click away from it for a second. And the colors sort of obstruct our view, but you do see the fact that row 3 here has a double line border under it. There's even more you can do with the border feature. What we're showing here is just the borders toolbar. Now, if this is a floating palette, you can certainly move it around. You can also remove it simply by clicking on the X in the upper right corner. Later in this course, we'll talk about how you can go to the Format command, choose cells, and by going to border, you can get into even more possibilities. We'll look at that later. Click OK for now. In this section, we talked about how you could change the appearance of your worksheet. We talked about not only how to make cells bold and italic, but how to underline them, how to use color background, how to change the color of text, and how to put borders on cells. We also, along the way, showed you how to remove the grid line so that the borders that you might have used showed up more clearly.